The laughter was the first thing. It was sharp, and it cut through the clean, cold air of the winter festival. Elias Thorne stood by his work. He did not look at the men who laughed. He looked at the wood. His hands, cracked and scarred from 50 years of listening to the forest, rested on the high back of the storyteller's chair. The chair was cedar, red and deep, glowing with the resin he had rendered himself. It was carved with the story of the river, of the eagle, and of the path the buffalo herds used to take through the valley. It had taken him 3 moons to build, from the moment he first blessed the tree to the final polishing with beeswax and snow. Around them, the settlement was alive. The festival was meant to prove the valley was growing, that it was civilized. There were stalls of baked goods, smoking meats, and forged tools. But the center ring was for the craftsmanship prize. And there, Elias stood alone. Across the square, a crowd gathered around the other entry. It belonged to a man named Galloway. Galloway's work was loud. It was a full dining set, painted in bright greens and yellows, with gold paint on the edges. It was made of soft pine, cut quick at the new steam mill downriver. The joinery was hidden by putty and paint. The chairs were identical. The table was vast. Galloway himself was loud. He wore a waistcoat from St. Louis and smoked cigars that smelled of money and chemicals. His men, hired hands from the mill, were the ones laughing. "Look at that relic," one of them said, loud enough for the wind to carry. "Old Thorne must think the judge is his grandfather." "It's an Indian thing," another sneered, spitting tobacco. "All scratches and owls. No refinement." Galloway smiled, accepting a glass of whiskey. He nodded toward Elias. "The man is a memory. Let him have his moments. The future, gentlemen, looks like this." He slapped the painted table. It rattled. Elias felt the wood under his fingers. It was warm despite the cold. He saw the families of the town pass by. They looked at his chair. Their eyes were distant. They saw the hard work, but they did not understand it. They saw what Galloway had told them to see, a relic, a thing from a time that was ending. The sun was beginning to touch the high peaks. The shadows grew long and blue. The judge, a man from the east, was due to arrive. Elias pulled his worn buffalo coat tighter. He did not build the chair for the prize. He built it because the wood had asked him to. He built it to honor his teacher, 2 Rivers, who had shown him how to read the grain, how to find the spirit in the cedar. But standing here in the cold, while the sound of progress echoed across the square, he felt a loneliness that was deeper than the snow. The laughter faded. The crowd moved toward the bonfire. Elias Thorne remained, he and the chair, waiting for a judgment that had already, it seemed, been passed. "If these words have found you, it means the story is doing its work. Stories are like a fire. They keep the soul warm against the cold, and they gather us together. If you are listening, leave a word in the records below. Tell us where in the world this tale has reached you. It does an old storyteller good to know where his words have landed. Now listen close. The wind is settling and the night is not yet done. Before the snows came, Elias had lived a life defined by silence and the sharp song of his tools. His cabin was 3 days' ride from the settlement, high up in a cleft of the mountains, where the wind spoke in whistles. He was not a hermit. He was a listener. He had come to this land 30 years before, a young man chasing beaver. He found something else. He found the Arapaho. They did not fight him. They watched him. One winter his traps failed. His powder was wet. He was starving, his pride too great to ask for help. An old man found him, half frozen, trying to skin a rabbit with numb fingers. The old man was 2 Rivers. 2 Rivers did not offer him food. He offered him a tool, a curved knife. "The deer gives its life," 2 Rivers had said, his voice quiet as snow. "You give it honor. You waste the skin. You waste the bone. You do not see." Elias stayed. He learned. He learned that a tree had a life, and you did not take it without asking. He learned that the south side of the cedar was strong, hardened by the sun. The north side was soft, full of stories. He learned to build not just on the land, but with it, his cabins did not leak, his snowshoes did not break, his handles did not crack. When the settlers began to fill the valley, they came to Elias. They came for axe handles that felt alive in the hand. They came for chairs that cured the ache in a man's back. He traded his work for what he needed: flour, steel, shot, and bolts of canvas. Then came Galloway. Galloway had arrived 2 summers ago with a charter from a bank in the east. He built the steam mill. He brought noise, he brought speed. He clear-cut the valley floor, turning the ancient pines into raw lumber shipped downriver. He told the settlers that Elias was too slow, that he was too expensive. "Why wait a month for 1 chair?" Galloway argued in the new saloon, "when my mill can deliver 10 chairs in a day? This is the age of progress. The future does not wait for 1 man and a knife." The people, eager for comfort, eager for the future, had listened. Elias's trade dwindled. When the winter festival was announced with its grand prize for craftsmanship, the town elders had asked Elias to enter. "Show them the old way, Elias," one had said, shamefaced. "Show them what this valley is built on." EIAs agreed, not for them. He went to the mountains to find the tree. It was a red cedar that had been struck by lightning a decade prior. It was dead, but it was not rotten. It was cured by the mountain wind. He spent a week just sitting with it, sketching in the snow, learning its shape. 2 rivers had taught him this. Do not force the wood. Let the wood tell you what it wants to be. The wood, he decided, wanted to be a seat of honor, a place for the elders, a storyteller's chair. He worked from sunup to sundown. He used his adze, his draw knife, his hand augers. He made the butterfly joints that 2 rivers had shown him, a secret of the high country people, interlocking pieces that held stronger than any nail. He carved the river into the arms, so a man's hands would feel the flow of the water. He carved the eagle on the high back, its wings spread, a symbol of the great spirit that watched the valley. When he was done, the chair felt complete. It had a presence. He ran his hand over the smooth, oiled wood. It was not a relic, it was a prayer. And he was taking it to a town that had forgotten how to pray. He loaded the chair onto his mule sled. It was heavy, not just with wood, but with memory. He covered it in buffalo hide, tying it down with deer hide strips. The journey to the settlement was quiet. The snow was deep. The air was still. Elias walked, leading the mule. He felt the rightness of his work. It was solid. It was true. He arrived at the settlement as the sun was setting, painting the snow-caps in shades of apricot and blood. The town was already transformed. Canvas banners flapped in the breeze. The smell of pine smoke was mixed with the heavy, sour smell of coal from the steam mill. He found his assigned spot. It was near the edge of the square, away from the central fire. He unwrapped the chair. In the fading light, the cedar seemed to drink the colors of the sunset. It glowed. A few children stopped, their eyes wide. They reached out, but their mothers pulled them back. "Don't touch that, child, it's rough." Elias ran his hand over it. It was smooth as riverstone. He stood by his work as the night deepened. He ate his jerky and hardtack and waited. The next morning, the festival began, and Galloway arrived. Galloway did not bring his work on a sled. He had 2 large wagons, painted with his name, Galloway Lumber and Progress. His men unloaded the bright green and yellow furniture. It was massive. It took up 3 times the space of Elias's chair. Galloway set up opposite Elias, in the center of the square, right by the fire. He strode over, his polished boots crunching the snow. He did not look at Elias. He looked at the chair. He circled it once. He ran a gloved finger over the carved eagle. "Quaint," he said. The word hung in the air. "My grandmother had one like this. Used it for kindling, I believe." Elias met his gaze. He said nothing. "Old man," Galloway said, smiling, though his eyes were cold, "the world has moved on. People want comfort. They want speed. They don't want this." He waved a hand at the chair. "This is a monument to a dead time. The Indian time, the trapper time. It's over. This wood was living when your grandfather was a boy." Elias said, his voice a low rumble. "It will be standing when your mill is rust." Galloway laughed. It was the laugh Elias had heard earlier, the sharp, cutting laugh. "We shall see," Galloway said. "We shall see what the judge thinks of your relic." He turned and walked back to his display, shouting for his men to bring the varnish. Elias looked at the chair. He felt a cold knot of anger, not for himself, for the wood, for Two Rivers, for the mountain. He took a cloth from his pack and began to polish the cedar, bringing out the deep, warm grain. He would not be moved. The chair would not be moved. They would wait. The wood would speak its own truth. The first day passed. The townspeople flocked to Galloway's display. They sat in his painted chairs. They admired the sheer size of his table. They spoke of dinner parties, of impressing visitors from the East. Galloway's work was the future. It was what they wanted to become. They passed Elias's chair with a quick, nervous glance. It reminded them of what they were, simple, hard, and tied to the land. They were trying to escape that. Elias stood his ground. He answered the few questions he was asked. "What kind of wood?" "Red cedar, from the high ridges." "How long did it take?" "A lifetime," Elias answered. This confused them, and they moved on. The second day, the wind picked up. A dusting of snow covered everything. Elias carefully brushed the snow from the storyteller's chair. Galloway's men had to rush to cover their painted furniture with canvas, shouting as a gust nearly knocked over a gaudy green sideboard. The paint was already chipping in the cold. It was late in the afternoon when the judge arrived. He did not come with the fanfare Galloway had expected. A single sleigh, drawn by 2 grey horses, pulled into the square. A man stepped out. He was not old, but he was not young. He wore a simple, dark wool coat, impeccably cut. He looked, Elias thought, like a man who was never cold. His name was Judge Harlan. He was not a judge of laws, Elias learned. He was a judge of craft, an architect from New York, hired by the territorial governor to design the new Capitol building in Denver. Galloway rushed forward, his hand outstretched, a false smile beaming. "Judge Harlan, a distinct honor. Welcome to our humble festival. May I offer you a hot brandy?" Harlan looked at Galloway's hand, then at his face. "No, thank you, Mr. Galloway. I am here to work." Harlan's voice was like his coat, clean, dark, and without waste. He started his inspection. He did not hurry. He walked the entire square. He looked at the forged tools, nodding at the blacksmith. He inspected the quilts, praising a woman for her tight stitching. He was methodical. Then he arrived at Galloway's display. Galloway launched into his speech. "Steam-powered, sir. The height of modern efficiency. We can produce 500 units a week. This, sir, is the New West. We are building cities." Harlan walked around the big painted table. He ran a finger along a joint. He frowned when a flake of green paint came off on his glove. He lifted a chair. He tested its weight. "You value speed," Harlan said. "I value progress, sir," Galloway boomed. "Indeed." Harlan set the chair down. He looked at the rest of the display, his face impassive. Then he turned. He saw Elias standing quietly by the single chair. Harlan walked across the snow. The square grew quiet. Everyone was watching. He did not speak to Elias. He walked straight to the chair. He stopped. For a full minute, he just looked. Elias watched the judge's eyes. They were not looking at the whole chair. They were reading it. They followed the grain. They saw the carving of the river. Then Harlan did something that made the crowd murmur. He took off his glove. He placed his bare hand on the arm of the chair. He bent down. He looked under the chair where the legs met the seat. Elias knew what he was looking for. He was looking for nails, for glue, for shortcuts. Harlan traced the butterfly joints with his finger. He smelled the wood. He inhaled the faint scent of cedar and beeswax. He ran his thumb over the eagle's wing. Finally, he straightened. He looked at Elias. It was the first time 2 men had truly seen each other that day. Harlan saw the hands. He saw the quiet pride. Elias saw the understanding. The man knew wood. "You," Harlan said, his voice quiet, were his student. Elias was confused. My teacher was 2 rivers of the Arapaho. Harlan nodded slowly. I did not mean a man. I meant the mountain. The judge turned, putting his glove back on. He did not offer a word of praise or criticism. He simply walked to the center of the square, to the bonfire. I will announce my decision at sunset, he declared. Galloway poured another brandy, his hand shaking just slightly. He was no longer certain. Elias Thorne stood by his chair. The wood felt warm. The sun was a red slit between the peaks. The whole town was gathered. The bonfire crackled, sending sparks into the purple sky. Judge Harlan stood on the small wooden platform. He held a simple blue ribbon. Galloway stood near the front, flanked by his men. He had composed himself. He looked confident again. He was a man of the future, and this was his time. Elias stood in the back near the shadows, his hands in his pockets. He was calm. The chair had been seen. That was enough. I came to this valley, Judge Harlan began, his voice cutting through the cold air. I came looking for the future. He turned his gaze toward Galloway's display, and I found it. Galloway smiled. He bowed his head slightly. I found speed. I found efficiency. I found ambition. Harlan continued, I found what the new world demands. Quantity. Mr. Galloway has shown us that this valley can produce, that it can build, that it can join the great march of progress. His work is a testament to the steam engine, to the power of the new age. Gleaming, Galloway stepped forward, ready to accept the ribbon. Harlan held up a hand. But, the judge paused. The silence was absolute, broken only by the fire. But the prize is not for progress. It is not for speed. The prize, he said, his voice lowering, is for craftsmanship. Harlan turned his gaze to the back of the crowd, to the shadows where Elias stood. Craftsmanship is not about speed. It is about truth. He stepped off the platform. The crowd parted. Harlan walked through the snow. He walked past Galloway, whose smile was now frozen on his face, a mask of confusion. He walked past the painted furniture. He walked until he stood before Elias and the storyteller's chair. I have built cathedrals, Harlan said, his voice now only for Elias, though the whole town listened. I have studied with masters in Europe. I have seen the work of men who have been dead for 500 years. He reached out and placed his hand on the chair. This is alive. This is not a relic. This is a testament. It honors the tree it came from. It honors the hands that shaped it. It honors the land that bore them both. He looked at Elias. It is the only work here, he said, that the mountain would recognize as its own. He tied the blue ribbon to the high back, onto the carved eagle's wing. The prize is yours, Mr. Thorne. You have not shown us the future. You have shown us something eternal. The square was silent. Galloway stared, his face white with rage and humiliation. Then, from the edge of the crowd, the old blacksmith began to clap. Slowly, respectfully. Then the woman who had won for her quilt. Soon the entire town was applauding. Not the loud, raucous applause of the saloon, but the quiet, deep applause of recognition. They were not applauding Elias. They were applauding the chair. They were applauding the truth. The aftermath was quiet. Galloway and his men were gone by morning. They loaded their painted furniture in the dark, and their wagons were shadows moving down the valley at dawn. The steam mill fell silent. The people of the town, in the clear light of the morning after, looked at the storyteller's chair differently. They came to Elias, one by one. They touched the wood. They asked him to tell them the story of the river carved in the arms. They saw, finally, what the judge had seen. Judge Harlan found Elias packing his sled. Mr. Thorne, he said. Judge, I am building the new capital in Denver. It is a house for the people. It must be honest. Elias nodded, continuing to tie his ropes. They sent me to find the fastest way to build it, to find men like Galloway. And you found me, Elias said. I found you, Harlan agreed. The great doors, for the main hall. They must be like this. He gestured to the chair. They must speak of the land. He made Elias an offer. It was more money than Elias had seen in his life. Elias looked at the chair, the blue ribbon fluttering in the wind. "I cannot come to Denver," Elias said simply. "I will pay for your transport." "A workshop?" "The wood is here," Elias interrupted, pointing to the peaks. "The spirit is here. If I leave, the work is just wood. It will be dead, like his." Harlan was silent for a long time. He looked at the mountains, then back at the old man. He understood. This was not a negotiation. It was a statement of fact. "Then," Harlan said, a slow smile spreading across his face, "it seems I must find a way to bring the work to Denver, and the wood, and the master." "I am not a master," Elias said. "I am a listener." "Then you will teach them how to listen," Harlan replied. The two men shook hands. It was a contract sealed not by paper, but by the weight of the mountains. Elias left the chair in the town square. "It belongs to the valley," he told the mayor. "It is for the storytellers." He turned his mule toward the high country. He had to go ask the forest for permission. He had doors to build. Dawn broke over the high peaks. Winter gave way to spring. Elias Thorne did not return to the settlement. The settlement came to him. Judge Harlan was true to his word. He sent wagons, he sent money, but more than that, he sent men. Young men, not from the east, but from the valley. They came to Elias's cabin, their hats in their hands. They came to learn the old way. They came to learn to listen. He took them in. He taught them to see the grain. He taught them to use the draw knife, to feel the balance of the adze. He taught them what Two Rivers had taught him, that honor was not in the speed of the cut, but in the truth of the line. His small cabin became a workshop. The sound of saws and hammers returned to the high cleft, but it was a rhythmic sound. It was the sound of hands, not engines. They built the great doors for the Capitol. They were carved not with lions or eastern symbols, but with the story of the high country. The pine, the buffalo, the river, and the eagle. Elias never saw them installed. He did not need to. He had taught the wood to speak, and he had taught the men to listen. His legacy was not the doors, it was the hands that built them. The valley learned. Speed is an illusion. The wind and the rock value only endurance. A man's worth, like the worth of a tree, is not measured in how fast he grows, but in how true he stands. It is not measured in the noise he makes, but in the silence he commands. In the high country, honor is not a prize you win. It is the way you live. It is the work you leave behind. It is the quiet truth that endures long after the laughter has faded and the snows have melted. If you enjoyed this story, stay a while longer by the fire. There are more tales from the high country where honor rides the wind.